Our last speaker today is a woman of many avatars. We have known her as an author, we have known her as an activist, we have known her as an outspoken voice in the United States presidential campaign as she campaigned and helped Kamala Harris during the campaign. We have also known her as a food expert, as a TV show host, as a presenter of multiple series. I have run out of ways to describe my finale speaker, my friend Padma Lakshmi, who joins us on the Global Town Hall live now from New York today. Thank you, Padma. And it is a pleasure to close this Global Town Hall with you as our finale speaker. And like I said, I have run out of the many different adjectives that could be used to capture your spirit, your effervescence, your relentless appetite for life. I want to start by asking you how you would describe yourself. When I had to try and fit you into 4 words to announce that you are going to be a speaker here, I didn't know what those words should be. And I'm curious to know how you would define yourself.
Well, I want to say thank you for having me on. I was listening to Asha Devi and I was so moved as a mother and as somebody who frankly has been sexually assaulted. I cannot imagine what her daughter went through, but also what she's been going through these last 8 years. And my hat's off to her. I think she's fighting for all of our daughters. It is such an uphill battle anywhere, but especially in India. And I just wanted to say how important that conversation was. And, you know, I just had tears in my eyes listening because I remember that moment. It was so shocking. And thank you for having me on. How would I describe myself? I guess I would just describe myself as an author and as a maker of TV shows. I am a producer and a host of mostly food programming. And you know, I don't even think of myself as I mean, I am an activist, but I think of myself more as a concerned citizen and mother. You know, I don't think I really I always knew what was right and wrong, and I hopefully spoke up when I was sure of what I felt, but I don't think that my activism would go without me really going through some certain struggles that I have gone through, and all of my activism comes out of personal experience, really.
Yeah. So, you know, you spoke about the Nirbhaya moment, and that was a gang rape and murder that took place, you know, in a public space. But as we know, and we've spoken about this, Padma, where we are really violated is actually in the circle of trust. And then there are shrouds of violence thrown over that experience. I remember being a child of 10 when a relative in my extended family sexually abused me. You wrote about being 16 when you were date raped, and you wrote about it many years later, and I still remember the title of that article. It said, 32 years after my rape, I am here. It took 32 years for you to speak about it. It took me, I think, a couple of decades. I think it's when I wrote my book. What happens to us? Why does it take us so long, and why do we speak when we finally do? I want you to talk about why you went public with that, why it was so important. I know it was against the backdrop of what was happening with the Me Too movement, with Harvey Weinstein, with people saying, why don't women speak when it happens, not understanding the complexity of all the multiple emotions that an incident of sexual violence and abuse triggers.
I think that moment, I mean, I had talked about very briefly in my memoir 5 years ago about also being sexually abused as a child by a relative. But other than that one page in my book, I really hadn't spoken about my personal experience. And, you know, when the Kavanaugh hearings were going on in America, this was a Supreme Court judge who was being confirmed. And, you know, this very had come and said, you know, I was date raped by him. And it just made me really feel demoralized, because the same situation had happened when I was in college, you know, almost 25, 28 years ago, when another Supreme Court judge, Clarence Thomas, was also being confirmed, and somebody else, very credible, Anita Hill, had been, brave enough to come out, and she was vilified. And so was Christine Blasey Ford, which is why women don't come out. The reason that women aren't safe on the or in public spaces is because women aren't really safe in their homes. You see, if you're safe in your home, and if you're safe by the men in your life, whether it's your family or your schoolmates or your professional circles, then you will be safe in a public space, because who else do you think is occupying that public space? So there's no incentive except rage and incredible courage for anybody of sexual assault or abuse to come out, because you're the one put under the microscope, because the patriarchy is designed to protect the power structure. And it's because what you're doing when you speak out about these things is you are disrupting the status quo, because your life has been disrupted, and you're trying to prevent further disruption for, all the other women around, right? But it's not seen as that way, because whenever there's growth, there's pain. You cannot change anything without breaking something. And people are afraid of that. So the society doesn't make it very easy for you. And that's why people don't come out, whether they're protected and they have financial means in New York City, or whether they're sitting in some village, in Bihar. Like, it's the same bullshit everywhere. It's just a varying degrees. And I just was sick of it. I was disgusted. And I was hearing all these things on Twitter that said, if it was so bad, why didn't she report? And then there was this hashtag, me too. And I thought, I want to say, listen, this has happened 2-3 times in my life, and I never reported. And then that was on a Friday. And then I thought, what happened to me was really, really devastating and serious. And I have managed it alone all my life until now. But it deserves more than a hashtag. What happened to Asha Devi's daughter deserves more. And I'm so glad that she is naming her daughter, because she's right. Her daughter didn't do anything wrong. She's completely innocent, and we've got it backwards because we're afraid of this change. It is coming. It's coming in drips and drabs, or it's coming in a tsunami, but it is coming. And so you have to find some kind of power in the pain that you've gone through. And the only way, not to justify it, but anything positive out of what had happened to me, is to say, listen, I'm here as proof that this horrific stuff happens to all of us, regardless of economic class, education, religion, ethnicity, whether you're married, it happens. And that's what that was about. It was, for me, just out of real disgust at the system. And I wanted to do what I could. And the only thing that I could do that would have been the most powerful thing is to openly say out loud, the thing that I had never even said, it turns out, to my own mother. And I'm very close to my mother. I had to fact check that article I wrote myself, and it's very hard to rip off a 32-year-old Band-Aid. And yet that's really what I had to do.
Yeah. And it must have been painful. And after you wrote it and before you wrote it, you would have gone through your own set of emotions, right?
Yeah, I mean, it happened so fast, Barkha, because I knew that the hearings were going to be, you're a journalist, when you have to file an article, it has to be, also relevant at that moment. And so I think it was actually a blessing in disguise that I didn't have that much time to ruminate or think about whether should I do this and how should I do this. I just vomited everything I ever thought about it first, and then I kind of shaped it. And I just wanted it to be very matter of fact, because we women also get blamed for being too emotional or hysterical. Even the word hysteria comes from, the uterus, right? So I just wanted to be descriptive and describe happened. And I don't think I was at a point in the processing of that, because I hadn't said anything out loud until then, to do much more anyway. And so I just did what I did. And then I literally had to go to bed for 3 days. I didn't leave the house. I think the first time I left the house was after it was published. And I literally walked a block and a half to the gym from my place. And this woman stopped me on the street and she said, you know, I read your piece and I read it because somebody sent it to me. And it, you know, it was so important to read that piece because it happened to me. I was still shaking. And, you know, because I had come out, people I would encounter, and there weren't many people I would encounter because I was, as I said, keeping very close to home in those first few days. You know, whether it was men or women, were really, really affected by it because, you know, it's easy to see how that can happen to somebody who's not together, doesn't have their own independence and place in the world. And, you know, I'm somebody that people see in newspapers or on television, and it would be easy to have the impression that today, maybe not always, but today, that I'm sort of very protected and solid, and how would anybody ever do something like that to me? But it happens to all of us. And that's what I was really trying to say in that piece. And until we say that aloud over and over again, nothing is going to change, because I do believe there are wonderful men who love their wives and daughters and sisters and mothers. And we cannot do this alone. We have to do them with our male counterparts.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some assumption, and even we make that assumption about ourselves, that if we're tough enough, this won't happen to us, but all of it happens to all of us. You know, for me, looking at you over the last couple of years, and that's what we've called this conversation, in your life, I see the personal and the political enmeshing, right? It's like the personal has literally become the political. So you spoke about this trauma 32 years later because you were actually trying to make a political point in the deepest possible way. You're also, you know, been a very vocal voice on the Kamala Harris Biden campaign. I saw your interview with Kamala Harris. I think for you, the possibility that Trump, with his grab them by the pussy kind of politics, it was horror, as it was for millions of women. What's this year been like? Because even the food show that you're fronting for Hulu, you know, we don't get to see it here, but unless we download it illegally, you have to send me that link. It's about the politics of immigration. It's about the politics of immigration and seen through food, right? It's all these migrant communities and their food and their culture and their contribution to society. So take a look back at this year, how political it's been for you, how the personal just stepped in and slipped into the political.
I mean, I never thought of myself as a political person. I really didn't. You know, I was in college as a financial aid student during the Bush years. And so I remember how things were being cut for people who were that. When Hillary Clinton was running, you know, I felt I had to do everything I could for her. And even before that, when Barack Obama was running, I campaigned for him. But, you know, it was sort of a generalized, this is what I should do because I can sort of thing. You and I spoke when that election was going on in a park here at Washington Square Park. And I said to you then, you know, I said to you, you know, he's tacky, he's loud, he's a, you know, con man. Even I did not, and many of us did not think that he could cause as much damage as he has in the short time, you know, before he was president. And I really thought it was going to be a slam dunk, like most people. I mean, you were even with me on the night in Javits Center when, you know, we were all there with Hillary on the night of the election. It was such a heartbreaking moment. I couldn't even finish the interview with you because I started crying. And then what happened is that very the election, I saw how he was vilifying immigrants. And I was an immigrant. I am an immigrant. I came to America when I was 4, and my mother came here when I was 2. And, you know, we've made our life like so many millions of people who have built this country, you know, coming here from all over the world. And I really resented the Muslim ban. I really resented how he was talking about Mexicans being rapists. And I just found it really offensive and really ignorant. And, you know, I really grew up in a neighborhood with immigrants. And so now I'm present as somebody who's very much in a different situation, but those are my people. Like, my mother's a nurse, my father's a plumber. Like, I still feel inside my heart like that little girl, so it just pissed me off. And so I started working for the ACLU, and I'm not a politician. I don't ever want to be a politician, but, I just used my personal experience to say what I thought I should be said, what I believed in. And so I really, really became very political through my personal beliefs. And I think that the things that are very personal to our lives are exactly the kinds of things that we should be political about. There's nothing more political than food, for example. Politics really should be about government giving to its people what they need. Politics should be about the needs of the people, because that is the only reason that government exists and should exist. In any country, it exists to protect our borders. It exists to protect our people. It exists to protect our environment. It exists to protect, hopefully, the weakest members of our society, to educate them, to keep them healthy. All of these things are why we need organized government. So if you have a government that is not addressing the needs of its people, then that government should cease to exist. And so I cannot think of anything more political than food. And I wanted to do another show. I'm very proud of Top Chef, and it's a very big show, obviously, and it's provided a lifestyle for me and my daughter that I'm very thankful for. But I wanted to do something that felt much more personal, and going into the next decade of my life, something that I found stimulating, a different part of my brain. Food is also so personal. It's also so emotional, and it has attached to it so much nostalgia. And I wasn't seeing a lot of that in most TV shows around the world, mine included. It's all about the analysis of the food. It's all about how to make it, all that stuff. But I wanted to talk about how food is so connected to our emotional lives and how it's connected to our identity. And I was very lucky in that I, did this thing, which is almost impossible. And what any working person can hope for is to merge what you believe in and what you want to be active about and your professional life in one. And I didn't want to do a lifestyle show. Like, I don't give a shit about that, I watch those programs, don't get me wrong, and I enjoy them,
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, but I just didn't want to do that, I'm so glad. It was very hard to get Taste the Nation made. I got 7 no's all over Hollywood and New York before Hulu said yes. And by the time they said yes, or they asked for me to, meet with them, I actually met with them like this and last year. I just got so fed up because I started thinking, am I the only one interested in immigrants and this kind of material? Like, do we just want to go to fancy restaurants around the world? So I just pitched the show exactly the way I wanted to do it. I didn't care about what anybody thought, and they bought it. They've been really supportive. And so what Taste the Nation does is it really takes an honest look at who we are as Americans. Because this term that Trump has taken as his own, America first, we're American with the American flag. America was built by immigrants. Even his grandfather was a German immigrant. So what are we talking about here? Because unless you're from the Cherokee Nation or some other Native American indigenous tribe, you too are either an immigrant or are the descendant or daughter or granddaughter of an immigrant. So you have no leg to stand on. And that's what I wanted to prove. And because people are used to me speaking in the language of food, I thought that would be the most powerful instrument I could use. But the show is not really about food. It's about food because I love food, but the food is just a Trojan horse. Because even if people don't want to talk about politics or religion, they will talk to you about their favorite recipe their grandma gave them. And that can be a key in to develop an intimacy with people, because the show is really about people who make this country what it is and make the food what it is and how that is ever evolving.
So you mentioned grandma's recipes, and I think that is the cue for me to go to your grandma's state. And we tried very hard to convince your granny to join us, but we didn't succeed. But we did convince your
No.
very reclusive, shy Aunt Neela to come on for a few minutes and came. She
Hi.
it took a lot of convincing, but here we are, and I'm still hoping that you can get us a glimpse of Granny Neela. Is that possible?
I'm trying
Like a
to. I'm
glimpse?
trying to. She did say yes, but then
Come, let's
We can't
try.
last
hear
minute she
her.
Let's
said,
try.
"No, I'm going to sleep," and she's gone to sleep now. She's not even.
Padma, can you
Hi,
hear Neela?
Krishna.
I,
I can't hear
Can you hear
Neela,
me?
but somebody else has come to say hi to you.
that's
Can you
Krishna,
hear
Padma's
me?
daughter. Can we
Oh
get
my
the
God,
audio?
I'm missing them so
Just
much.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
just a
hang on.
sec.
Hang on. We're going to try and fix that to you. And Padma, keep Krishna with you. Keep Krishna with you. She's run off. But in the meantime,
She's
Neela,
right here.
I'm sure you can hear Padma. And
Yes, I
so
can.
just tell us a
Oh,
little
there
bit
you
about
are,
the
Neela.
Padma there. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Padma that is far away from the arc lights, far away from this glamour world, far away from the stereotypes and the boxes that everybody puts Padma in. And tell us a little bit about, she was talking about, grandmother's recipes. And I know because I read her memoirs, how connected she still is to India and to her memories of growing up with all of you.
Absolutely. For me, Padma's my little baby sister. I have to say that I was there the day at my mom didn't let me go to the hospital the day until she was born. Luckily, the day she was born, my mother allowed me to go, and I was so excited, and I was hoping for a girl baby. I didn't want a boy there because I had brothers, and I wanted this little girl to play with, and there she was. So it's I knew her even before she was born. I must say that. Uh, Padma and me, we've had a very close relationship, and her any to food and all that comes way much before, because every time we went to an aunt's place or wherever we went, it would start with food. Like we always did it together. We have these korakattais that we make, they are like modaks. And we would sit, she was all of 4 or 5, but we would all sit together every vacation that she came, whether we knew how to do or not. And mom was really generous in giving us little bits to try, So we would do that. So that's, I think from there, she's gone way over with her food. Um, and the thing is, when she comes home, we never let her cook. Mom doesn't think she's
I
a
know.
cook. She can cook, or she'll say, Vanda, no need. You don't have to cook. You just sit there. What are you going to mess up the whole thing? No need. And even I have been not been allowed to cook because my sister-in-law was there next to mom, and only then my chance. Now that mom is older and she gets a little forgetful about things, she lets me do it. She says, "Ah, Neela, I'll do it. Neela, I'll do it." So it's like that. But one thing that I've wanted to say is every vacation that she came home, because I was very close to her, I was devastated when she left for the US. I was so sad. And I would wait for her to come every year for vacation. And believe it or not, it's still continuing not with Padma, but with Krishna. Krishna, every time
Yeah.
Padma makes it a point to send her, which is so rare. Like moms, especially moms who have had their children late, or even younger moms, don't like to send their child by themselves. But every year, Padma makes it a point to send Krishna, just so that Krishna has that attachment with us that we've had, and
Yeah.
she knows how important this
Yeah.
relationship is to us. So Padma is basically a
Yeah.
very family person here. We don't see the glamour at all. So we
Yeah.
it's she's just like our kid, and we treat her like that. There's nothing special for us, when she comes home. She's one of us, and we're all girls in the family, and there's just one boy, and he gets it all the time because we're all together and gang up against him. So I really, really, really miss that, Padma. It's so long since I saw you.
I know. I know.
There, look at the whole
Because of
bunch of
the
us.
quarantine, we haven't been able to come,
So
but
yeah, and
usually we
we're a
make
very
a trip
close
once
knit
a year.
family. Yeah, and we are
Yeah. That
really
was a
close
great
knit
photo.
family. My brothers and my other nieces, we're all quite close and thick, and I'm like in between, so I get the best of both.
Yeah. Padma, I want you to talk a little bit about the memories, that you carry from those family holidays. In your memoirs, you're very evocative about them. And I read your book a few years ago, but I still remember the description of you wanting ice cream and I think hiding under the bed, having bought a
Yeah.
little ice cream cup that your grandfather or your grandmother, correct me, who I think it was a granddad that you write about, would give you money and
Yeah.
you'd go and buy those little vanilla or strawberry cups that we used to get at that time, that you'd go hiding under the bed and eat it all up. You know, that
Yeah.
memory, when you shut your eyes and you think of your childhood, what's the first thing you remember?
I remember two influences. You know, my grandparents were a huge looming influence in my upbringing. In a way, they were like my parents, and my mother was like a second mom, you know? And so I remember food because of my grandmother. She was always cooking. We had two burners in our stove with 10 people there, inspiration, and this was Madras. And then I remember books from my grandfather because he's one of the most learned people I know and the most well-read, greatest general knowledge, you know, that I know of anybody. And I've met some pretty interesting people. So, you know, those two things I think have fused in me as what is important, what you need for your brain and your mind and what you need for your body. So for me, I have a very sensual, and what I mean by sensual is not sexual, I mean sensorial and visceral relationship to food, how it smells, how it, you know, how it sounds when that sarson, you know, how it
Tadka.
feels, whether it's
The
crunchy or
chonk,
soft
the
in your
chonk
mouth.
as it's called. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, the mustard seed.
all of that, you know. So those early memories were really imprinted on me. And for me, I think it helps to be close to my family because I have gone, say, so far away from how I grew up. You know, my life today is on a daily basis much different, right? Not only because I'm an adult, but just because I'm in a different country, I'm doing a different thing than most of my family. So it really helps for me to have an anchor, even if it's deep down and nobody can see it, to have that very strong, heavy anchor of my family in India, because it gives me a sense of calm. It takes away the anxiety because I know no matter what, I have that place to run to. I can still go back. You know, I still go back to my grandmother's house, or I send Krishna. She ran away because she has school now, online school. But you know, she also has this. I want Krishna to have it. I want her to have a very long chain so that she can go out and explore with as much freedom to become the best of who she wants to be. But underneath that, on the other end of that very heavy and stable, solid chain, is a really big anchor that she can always come back to for shelter, both emotional and physical, for support, for some kind of unconditional, just unconditional space that's safe where she knows that. Because if you're a woman and you're trying to do something non-traditional and are ambitious, you have to have some place where you're allowed to be vulnerable, where you can let your guard down, where you can talk and people will tell you exactly what they think. You know, they may have different views on a lot of things. You know, I'm not as conservative as many of my family members are. But it helps. It helps to know that I have a place where I'm safe, where I'm loved, where I'm accepted and supported. And that's asking a lot considering some of the things I've done in my life with how my family traditionally been and lived and thought and their culture in a very, you know, not orthodox, but very conservative, middle class South Indian family.
Yeah. I was going to ask Neela exactly that Padma Neela has lived on her own terms. She has loved who she's wanted to. She's had a child with whom she's wanted to. They haven't necessarily always been the same people. Sometimes they've overlapped. And then she's gone and written a whole book about all of that, right? And I frankly love her completely and totally because I have never met a person who has owned her life and her relationships so totally, owned her mistakes so totally, and has written so candidly about them and has lived completely on her own terms. But I'm imagining that at times it may have caused ripples in the larger family. Did she shock all of you?
Um, she did shock some of us. but I have always been
Very diplomatic.
I have not been like like you said, like she's owned this and she's owned that. But before all that owning, there is this huge confusion, what should I do? And that's when, it'll be like a call at two
Sounds
o'clock
very
in the
familiar,
night.
I promise you, for
It
a
will
lot
be
of
like two
us. But
o'clock
yeah,
at the night. For 2 hours, we'll chat about it. And, sometimes I'll say, no, I don't think you're doing it right. That's not the way to do it. She'll say, no, why do you think it's that way? So we've had these fights, but in a good way. But the thing is, we've all, she's ours. So we will accept. We'll fight with her. We'll tell her what she's doing is completely crazy, but never outside. Like she's done it. We defend her. It's always, even my dad has been like that. Earlier when she did these photographs, her nude photographs, what she did, she brought it to my dad. And my dad is conservative and all this. She brought it to him and she showed it to him. She said, this is what I have done. I don't want somebody else to come and show this to you and says, look what your granddaughter has done. And he
yeah,
said, that's fine. And even when she married Salman, even at that time, she came and told him first, I'm marrying him. And, he's a Muslim. Because all those issues were there those days, at home. But dad,
Yeah.
he,
It's a
he
big
told her, if
deal.
you're happy, it was a big deal. He said, if you're happy, I'm happy for you. And that's all that's one thing that we've all held on to, what makes you happy for all of us, whether it's her or me or Rajni or any of us, that's something both my parents have, dad and mom have said that all the time, and we're all their kids. So it's been like that for all of us. Ultimately we share that, we just
yeah,
help each other to be happy.
yeah.
So
But
Yeah, they may
Padma,
not
I
have
want to ask.
all agreed.
Yeah, I was
They
just
may
going to
not have
ask
always
you that.
agreed. In fact, often disagreed, but they have accepted that it is my life to choose to do what I
yes,
want with. And
absolutely.
that is
Yeah,
the most liberal thing you can do for someone you love,
yeah.
is give them the
But Padma,
freedom
I
to
have
be who
to
they
ask
are.
you this. I have to ask you this. Your memoirs are actually extraordinary by any liberal standard, right? Because they chronicle many deeply intimate life choices that you made, whether it was your marriage to Salman Rushdie, whether it was your separation from him, whether it was, another relationship, multiple relationships. You were called all kinds of names after that book came out. It
Yeah.
takes, extraordinary. I mean, there's a really funny quote of yours on Salman, and
I know you
it's
put this
making me
quote, but you're always like a typical journalist, always like
I,
sensationalized.
I didn't even know. I didn't even know that was coming up. But I promise you, I just saw it and I paused. But here, this is the operative one, right? This, I mean, can we go to the next one about the food poisoning one just for a second? If we can go to the next one, my years with Salman were like a beautiful meal that ultimately left me with mood poisoning. I cannot forget that sentence out of your memoirs. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is not so much about Salman and you. The reason I'm bringing this up is that book, your memoirs, were so candid, was so profoundly candid that you exposed yourself to the entire world, possibly sitting in judgment on you. There'll be Neela who love you. There'll be me who will love and admire you. But there will be a part of the world that will shit on you for the book you wrote, right? How do you deal with that backlash? The fact that you wrote about Krishna, your relationship with Adam, your other relationships. You even wrote about like your endometriosis. And in that context, you wrote about your sex life. You wrote everything. Whatever you thought inside, you wrote. And after you wrote it, came everybody else's judgment. How did you deal with that?
Actually, writing the memoir was pretty liberating because for so much of my life, my personal narrative or the details of my life were twisted or exaggerated in the media, to sell newspapers. And a lot of times it wasn't accurate or it didn't have nuance to it, it didn't have
Yeah.
context. So, so writing the book, I knew that I wanted to write an honest book because I love memoirs. I love, reading those kind of books. So I knew that whether it sold 2 copies or 2 million, I wanted it to be authentic and good. And a good memoir is an honest. Otherwise, don't bother. It's just a piece of PR fluff, right? So
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do that, and I don't even think I would have talked about Salman as much. He's only in the first 2 chapters, by the way, and then he's not in there anymore. But I had to, if I wanted to talk about endometriosis. It's a health foundation that We started in 2009. And, again, a lot of the problems that we women face are because nobody wants to talk about these things. Nobody wants to talk about reproductive illness that affects 200 million women around the world, and so I just knew that if I wanted to talk about those things, I had to do it in a full-throated way. And actually, writing the memoir was great because nobody can say anything about me that I haven't said about myself
This is
already. And,
true.
I didn't
This is true.
care. For so many years, I was so afraid of what or how would I come off or any of that. I also write a lot about imposter syndrome at work because I wasn't a chef and I didn't go to culinary school. And yet, I'm doing a lot of hosting and critiquing and stuff on food. So, I talk about all those things, and I much good books had helped me, and I wanted to do that. I had Neela, I had my mom, and I
And now
had,
you have and now you have that little pup. Can you show that pup?
I know,
Just ran
I'm
away.
not, I don't even like dogs, but I really love my daughter, and it's been hard to do in quarantine. So that's why Divina is now in our lives. But, I wish I had had more mentorship when I was growing up, professional mentorship. And I think women need that. Men have all sorts of support systems and women don't. And often, we have to figure it all out on our own. So I wanted to do that at the start with the book to say, it takes time to become who you're going to be as a human being. It's not, some of the rules that we're living by were created over 100 years ago when the lifespan was 40. Now we're living till 85, 90. So the arc of a person's life is much different. And so I wanted to use my life as an example to illustrate certain things that I had learned through my own experience. And since the memoir, I have made it my mission to mentor young women. And I have, just a handful, 4 or 5 young women, some of them who've been with me for 11 years. I mentor all in their 20s and early 30s now, because I want them to have what I didn't have. As feminists, if we keep saying we want the world to be better, we want the world to be better, it doesn't have to be in big sweeping movements. What can I do with the power that I have to actually make everybody else's life? It's very gratifying. I'm sure I've gotten much more out of mentoring these young women than they have. It can be anything from a young woman who's hosting a show to getting her my lawyer to negotiate her contract because she doesn't even know what to ask for. It can be picking up the phone and making a call to make sure that another woman's investors know that I'm also an investor, even if I'm a small investor with whatever I can, because that makes them take her seriously where they might not because she's just a 25-year-old woman. Well, she happens to be a really brilliant 25-year-old woman, and she deserves that. And I just didn't know anybody in the fields that I was in to ask for help. And I think as women become more powerful in more leadership roles in government, in business, in philanthropy, in the arts and journalism, we need to do that in a very direct way for the next generation. Have a place at the table. We need to elbow to make room for others. Otherwise, our legacy after we die will be meaningless.
I agree. I have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask Neela two things. One, tell us something about Padma that I don't know and that our audience doesn't know. Just one thing that would surprise us. And two, please do try and get us Granny so that Padma can at least say hi.
She won't.
Yeah, it's
just
really
let us
tough.
see
She's
her.
gone to sleep now. So
Okay, try.
let me see.
But tell us about.
I will try.
Tell us while we
Okay.
still have Padma on. But tell us something about Padma that nobody knows, and that would really
Oh my
surprise
God.
us.
I don't think there is anything.
Everything about herself, just the way
No,
she
like
is.
maybe
She's written
it doesn't have to be sensational. It could just be some dimension of her that people don't know or would be surprised to learn.
Okay, I really have to think about this. There's so many
What's
things
when you close your eyes and you think of Padma, what comes first to your mind?
For me, what comes to my mind is she's always there when I need her. That she's always helpful and she's always there. And she won't ask too many questions. She kind of senses that
Yeah.
need and she's there. though, like out, in fact, this was something very strong. I used to feel even like 15, 20 years ago also, this was the thought that was always there, but people thought of her very different. They didn't know, but in a way it's good that her book came out so they know the real her. But that is one thing that is always there for me. Of course, there are many funny
Yeah.
incidents, but yes, this is what is something
Lovely.
that comes to my
Are, are
mind.
you are you going to try and convince Granny to make an
Let me try
appearance?
if she's awake. I think she's gone off to sleep. I'll just go try. Yeah.
Okay, try and come back and tell us, and we'll talk to Padma for a couple of more minutes till then.
Give me a second.
Padma, for the record, I thought that the memoirs were brave and fantastic and took an act of courage. And you remember I was like at the launch, your Delhi launch, and
Yeah,
I
thank you.
I thought it was enormously courageous. Now you're the mother to a young girl, right? How are you focused on bringing her up as a feminist daughter? How do we raise feminist daughters and sons?
I think you have to work very hard to counteract the images and messages they get, both overt
Yeah.
messages and discreet messages from all of the media and all of the world outside your home, but even okay, but also, sometimes within your own home. We all have family members that we love, or partners or their family members that we love. But, there are different viewpoints often within your inner circle as well. And so it's very important to me, I think, that she has a very strong sense of identity. And I always tell her, you are not like other people, and that has nothing to do with whether you're a girl or boy. You will live the life that is different than most people, and that begs you to have a reaction and work toward a life that is also uncommon, because you've been given a lot of resources. You need to do something useful with those resources. And so for me, I just want to raise Krishna to be ambitious, to be kind, and to understand her place in the world. We don't all start off with the same opportunities or the same gifts or talents. Anyway, our job, whoever we are, I believe, is to take ourselves and develop ourselves and find out what's the best thing we have to offer to our community, to our culture, and offer that, because that life is a meaningful life. I'm not even talking about what you do for a living, whether you're a florist or a plumber
Yeah.
or a surgeon or a writer, it's not even so much what you do, but how you do it. And so for me, the biggest thing I want Krishna to have is empathy. Empathy includes having empathy for herself. And, I always tell her, like, you are a lovely girl, you're a beautiful girl, you're going to be a beautiful woman, but beauty is just skin deep, but dumb and dull are to the bone. So that's what you have to really develop in yourself, because there'll always be another pretty girl. And society tells women that we are there to give pleasure to other people, that we have to kind of placate or always kowtow, to what people want us to be, that it's always a reactive process. And, she internalizes a lot just from my actions more than what I tell her. And so I'm very conscious of what she hears and sees me do and don't do. Like, every year during the Emmys, for example, I used to go on a crash diet, because the Emmys are always right after we film Top Chef in the summer. And then I'm at my heaviest, which is like 10 or 15 pounds, 7 kilos more than I am normally, because I'm eating so much on the show. Then I have to go on a red carpet. And, that was fine when I was 22, but I'm a 50-year-old woman now. So
Yeah.
I work really hard. I exercise like at least an hour every single day. Even when I'm in India, I find things to do. But, a few years ago when she was 7, she wasn't eating something on her plate one day. And I said, what are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm just watching my weight, Mom. And I had realized that, inadvertently, cutting out all the things I love to eat for like that month, which is fine to do and healthy. I hadn't been presenting it in the right way. I had just kept saying, no, I'm not going to have that ice cream because I want to lose weight. So she internalized that. And so I stopped that immediately. I still want to be healthy. I still, when I'm doing that, I don't I have a lot of fried foods and stuff, but I talk about it differently, and I talk about it as being healthy. But I don't try to lose weight to fit into some evening gown anymore, because actually, even at my heaviest weight, I'm still thinner than most women, and I'm very lucky because of my genetics and having a strong metabolism. That and that's really what I want her to know. I don't want her to worry so much about her appearance. And in quarantine, I'm being very frank and open. In quarantine, because she's an only child, she didn't have a lot of the activities that take up her day. And so what choice did she have but to look in the mirror all the time and starting puberty? And so another reason why I got her the puppy is so that she would have something else to focus on beside herself, because she should have as much of her childhood as she can. You know, we all deserve that beautiful, safe, happy-go-lucky time to develop who we want to be without trying to cater to everyone else's tastes and needs. And that's what I hope for her. I hope she has a really strong, fully formed sense of who she is and who she wants to be, that she doesn't have to listen to multiple voices around her and be, you know, like we all go through when we're about, do I want to be this? Do I want to be that? Do I want to be a little bit? You don't know who you are. My purpose is to give her a very deep and solid sense of who she is and who she isn't.
Yeah, that's absolutely well said. And I can understand the kind of everyday struggles that you go through to make that case, you know, to present the case correctly in the way that you want to. Neela, I'm looking at you and thinking, have we had any luck or no?
She's gone to sleep. I'm here.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so thank you, Neela. It's almost 9:30 in India, and I just want to ask Padma before we let her go. I hope you know, I know your special relationship with curd rice, and I know that a lot of people watching, there were questions about like, I teach Krishna Tamil, and I said, more than that, let me ask you about curd rice, and I think that'll say more.
Yeah, I mean, Krishna likes Indian food. She eats spicier food than most of her American counterparts, but you know, she likes to make sweets. She has a mighty sweet tooth, so she'll eat sai sadam or curds and rice if I make it for her, or she'll eat sambar or dal and rice. But you know, I have to mix it with my hands when it's piping hot with ghee, and otherwise she won't eat it. Like she says it. Obviously, you know, I'm a working woman, so I'm not always here to do that. But she likes that. I mean, she doesn't speak Tamil, sadly, but she does understand what's being said in Tamil. You know, I think that's more because of tone. And she does understand a few words. The problem is that everybody in our audience are at least trilingual. So she doesn't know what words are Hindi and what words are Tamil, because to her it's all just one Indian language. She can't differentiate. So it's a little jumbled. She speaks some kind of pidgin language that has originated in our family, because we all live down south.
Yeah, well, the great Indian family, that part never changes. You can take the girl to New York, but you can't make her lose her extended Indian family, right, across time zones and across continents. Thank you, Neela. I've got to come there and now meet the reclusive granny. Padma, as always, a delight. It's just such a pleasure to talk to you. The range of things we can talk about, we could go on, but I know you have to get on with your day in New York. Neela has to rest. Lure the reclusive Neela out of her shyness. It's been thank you, both of you. Padma, thank you. And I'm looking forward to watching the brilliant new series. I know there's a second season coming up, and I hope we can get to watch it here in India. Thank you, Padma, and thank you, Neela.